Biomed Nexus Daily Updates, your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR Lilly's Retatrutide hit in both TRIUMPH-2 and TRIUMPH-3, its pivotal Phase 3 trials in type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. The triple hormone drug we have tracked on the calendar for months delivered, and it cements Lilly's path to the biggest obesity franchise in the industry. Section 232 pharma tariffs take effect for large companies this Friday, the week's main event and our thread to watch. Otsuka won FDA approval for Simtrio, centanafadine, in ADHD, the payoff of the positive data we covered earlier this month. Sanofi discontinued amlitelimab in atopic dermatitis, dropping an OX40 ligand antibody it once saw as a pipeline centerpiece. J&J posted fuller Phase 3 data showing a dual bispecific regimen sharply improved survival in relapsed or refractory myeloma. Executive takeaway Retatrutide is the drug the whole obesity field has been waiting on, and over the weekend it delivered again. Lilly reported positive top-line results from TRIUMPH-2 in type 2 diabetes and TRIUMPH-3 in cardiovascular disease, two pivotal Phase 3 trials we have carried on our catalyst calendar for months. Retatrutide is a first-in-class triple hormone receptor agonist hitting GIP, GLP-1 and glucagon at once, and its Phase 2 weight loss of roughly 28% already set it apart as potentially the most powerful obesity drug in development. Positive pivotal data in diabetes and cardiovascular disease broaden the story from weight loss alone to the metabolic and cardiovascular outcomes that drive the largest markets and the best reimbursement. This is the asset behind the projections that Lilly's metabolic franchise becomes the biggest blockbuster ever, topping $70 billion by the early 2030s. With Retatrutide now de-risked across three pivotal settings, those projections look less like optimism and more like a base case for everyone chasing Lilly in obesity, from Novo to Pfizer, rebuilding from scratch. The target just moved further away. Now the week ahead and our thread to watch. Friday is July 31st, when the Section 232 pharma tariffs take effect for large companies. This has been on our calendar for months, and it is now days away. It arrives on top of the generic drug tariffs Trump announced last week for 2028, so the trade pressure on pharma is stacking. The question for the week is how companies respond as the deadline lands, whether we see more onshoring announcements, pricing signals, or supply chain moves, and whether the large caps reporting earnings this week address the tariff hit directly. We will track the run-up and pay it off Friday. Between Retatrutide cementing Lilly's dominance and tariffs reshaping the cost of making drugs, the week captures the two forces defining the industry right now: extraordinary science and rising political friction moving at the same time. Read full analysis. GLP-1 and metabolic Retatrutide cleared two more pivotal trials, and Lilly's lead just widened. LLY Lilly reported positive top-line results from TRIUMPH-2 and TRIUMPH-3, its pivotal Phase 3 trials of Retatrutide in type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, according to the pharma letter. Retatrutide is a first-in-class triple hormone receptor agonist targeting GIP, GLP-1 and glucagon, and its earlier data showed weight loss around 28%, the highest in the class. Extending positive pivotal results into diabetes and cardiovascular disease matters because those indications unlock the largest patient populations and the strongest reimbursement, moving Retatrutide beyond a weight loss story into a full metabolic franchise. It is the asset underpinning projections that Lilly's obesity and diabetes business becomes the biggest blockbuster ever, topping $70 by the early 2030s. With the TRIUMPH program delivering across settings, Retatrutide is on track for a launch that analysts have penciled in for 2027, and Lilly's dominance of the category looks increasingly hard to challenge. Policy. the Section 232 tariffs land Friday, and the trade pressure is stacking. The Section 232 pharma tariffs take effect for large companies this Friday, July 31st, the marquee policy event of the week. They arrive just after President Trump announced separate tariffs on imported generic drugs for 2028, framed as a penalty for companies that do not reshore production, which we covered last week. The layering matters. Large branded manufacturers face the Section 232 levies now, and the generic supply chain faces its own countdown, so the entire industry is being pushed toward domestic production simultaneously. The open question we keep returning to is whether tariffs can actually shift manufacturing without the subsidies and procurement guarantees that would make domestic production economical. This week, we find out how companies respond as the first deadline actually hits. Watch for onshoring announcements and for how the large caps reporting earnings address the tariff exposure. Oncology J&J's bispecific combination sharpened its myeloma survival case. J&J reported positive Phase 3 data showing a dual bispecific antibody regimen sharply improved survival in relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma, according to the pharma letter, building on the Monumental-6 readout we covered Friday, that showed an 89% improvement in progression-free survival and a 62% overall survival benefit. Combining two bispecific antibodies, Tecvayli and Talvey, which hit different targets, is an aggressive strategy that the strong survival data appear to justify. It is a meaningful boost for J&J in oncology, the same franchise that dragged on its Q2 earnings, and it strengthens the case for moving bispecifics into earlier and more central roles in myeloma treatment. Regulatory Otsuka landed its ADHD approval. OTSQ, the FDA approved Otsuka's Simtriol, centanafadine, a once-daily extended-release capsule for ADHD, according to the pharma letter. It is the payoff of the positive centanafadine data we flagged on July 8th. ADHD is a large and durable market, and a new non-stimulant option is commercially meaningful given the ongoing concerns about stimulant supply and misuse. For Otsuka, better known for its psychiatric franchise anchored by older products, a fresh ADHD approval adds a growth driver in central nervous system disease, one of the few bright spots in a neuropsychiatry field that has been punishing this year. Clinical Sanofi walked away from a drug it once counted on. SNY Sanofi discontinued clinical development of amlitelimab, an OX40 ligand antibody, in moderate to severe atopic dermatitis, according to the pharma letter. It is a notable retreat since amlitelimab was an asset Sanofi had highlighted as a future growth driver in immunology. Atopic dermatitis is a crowded and lucrative market, anchored by Dupixent, which Sanofi shares with Regeneron and which faces its own patent cliff, so a pipeline setback there stings more than usual. The discontinuation adds to a difficult stretch for Sanofi that includes the riliprubart Phase 3 failure, the EU antitrust investigation over its flu vaccine marketing, and the FDA warning letter at its Genzyme site. The pressure on Sanofi's pipeline to deliver is building. Quick Hits Merck set out early access plans for alimatravir, its investigational once-monthly oral HIV PrEP, signing voluntary licensing deals to speed availability in low- and middle-income countries, if approved. A once-monthly oral option would be a major step for HIV prevention. B1 Medicines announced a 300-nanometer expansion of its Princeton West manufacturing and R&D center in New Jersey, bringing its total U.S. investment past $1 billion, notable timing with tariffs days away. China out-licensing is outpacing last year's record, PharmTech's expert panel reported, with peptide manufacturing now expanding beyond GLP-1 into cardiovascular and CNS uses, and a push to onshore bioconjugate manufacturing to cut reliance on China. Halozyme struck a license agreement for INCE 033989 with Incyte, extending its drug delivery franchise. The week in review, Monday, IgA nephropathy became a three-way race as Novartis won full Fabhalta approval. J&J opened earnings soft. GSK killed camlipixant. Tuesday, Lilly's tally reached 11 acquisitions this year, the most in pharma. Wednesday, Novo sued Lilly over GLP-1 advertising. Novartis posted 3% growth and reaffirmed guidance. Thursday, Trump announced 2028 generic drug tariffs and Indian pharma stocks fell. Two tools deals landed in a day. Friday and weekend, GSK's Nuvalent bet produced its first lung cancer approval. Retatrutide hit in Triumph 2 and Triumph 3. Otsuka won its ADHD approval. Sanofi dropped amlitelimab. Red, full analysis. Biomed. Nexus. Pro, institutional intelligence. Brief, Retatrutide. And the 70 betas question, Retatrutide hitting in Triumph 2 and Triumph 3 is the most important obesity news of the summer because it de-risks the asset that anchors the most ambitious revenue projection in the industry. The mechanism is the story. Retatrutide is a triple agonist hitting GIP, GLP-1 and glucagon receptors, one more target than tirzepatide's dual mechanism. That third lever, glucagon, contributes to energy expenditure and is the leading explanation for the roughly 28% weight loss Retatrutide showed in Phase 2, the highest of any drug in development. The question hanging over it was whether that potency would carry into the pivotal trials across the indications that matter most commercially. Triumph 2 in type 2 diabetes and Triumph 3 in cardiovascular disease answer part of that, extending the drug beyond weight loss into the metabolic and outcome settings that drive volume and reimbursement, the strategic picture for Lilly. The company already leads obesity with tirzepatide and has Foundayo in the oral market. Retatrutide adds the highest efficacy injectable to the portfolio, giving Lilly the top of the market across mechanisms and formats. That breadth is what underpins the Evaluate projection that the franchise becomes the biggest blockbuster ever at more than $70 billion by 2032. With the Triumph program delivering, that number moves from aggressive forecast toward base case, assuming a 2027 launch and manufacturing that can keep up. The competitive read, everyone chasing Lilly just got worse news. Novo is defending with oral Wegovy and its pipeline while fighting Lilly in court. Pfizer is rebuilding obesity discovery from scratch after danuglipron failed. The next-generation challengers, amylin combinations and muscle-preserving agents, are further behind. Retatrutide's success means the efficacy bar at the top of the market rises again, and the gap between Lilly and the field widens rather than narrows. The one genuine risk to the thesis is manufacturing and access, not efficacy, and the tariff environment we are watching this week adds a wrinkle to the cost of scaling supply. But on the science, Lilly's lead now looks close to unassailable. Section 232, what to watch as the deadline lands. The Section 232 pharma tariffs taking effect Friday for large companies is the week's defining event, and here is how to read it as it happens. The mechanism. Section 232 tariffs are levied on national security grounds, and applied to pharmaceuticals, they target the concentration of drug and ingredient production overseas. For large branded manufacturers, the immediate exposure is the imported finished products and active ingredients in their supply chains. The tariffs are designed to make domestic production relatively more attractive by raising the cost of imports. What to watch this week? First, onshoring announcements. Companies have been front-running this for months, with Lilly, Regeneron, Hikma, and others committing to U.S. manufacturing investment, and B1's 300 Normantown Princeton expansion over the weekend fits the pattern. Expect more such announcements timed to the deadline. Second, earnings commentary. The large caps reporting this week will be asked directly about tariff exposure, and their answers will reveal who is genuinely hedged and who is scrambling. Third, pricing signals. If companies indicate the tariffs will pressure margins or push prices, that is the real economic transmission, and it feeds directly into the drug pricing politics that never fully goes away. The exposure map. Most exposed are companies with heavy overseas manufacturing footprints and thin ability to shift quickly. Least exposed are those that have already invested in US capacity or make higher margin products that can absorb the cost. The generic layer is separate and hits in 2028, but the two together signal a sustained policy push to reshore, and the companies that read this early and invested look smart this week. Our read remains that tariffs alone are a blunt instrument that raises costs more reliably than they shift production, but the political commitment is real and stacking, and every company now has to plan for a higher cost, more domestic manufacturing base. Friday is when the first real bill comes due. Sanofi's mounting pressure. Sanofi discontinuing amlitelimab is a bigger deal in context than in isolation because it adds to a pattern that is starting to look like a trend. Amlitelimab was not a minor program. Sanofi had positioned the OX40 ligand antibody as a future immunology growth driver, part of its answer to the eventual decline of Dupixent, the mega blockbuster it shares with Regeneron that faces a patent cliff. Dropping it in atopic dermatitis, one of the largest immunology markets, removes a piece of the post-Dupixent plan. Stack it up. This year, Sanofi has seen the riliprubart Phase 3 failure in CIDP, opened an EU antitrust investigation over its flu vaccine marketing, received an FDA warning letter at its Genzyme manufacturing site in Ireland, and now discontinued amlitelimab. Individually, each is the kind of setback every large pharma absorbs. Together they raise a real question about whether Sanofi's pipeline can generate the growth needed to offset the Dupixent cliff and justify its strategy under CEO Paul Hudson, the read for investors. Sanofi is not in crisis and it retains a strong commercial base and real assets. But the margin for error is shrinking and the market will be less forgiving of the next stumble. The company needs a clear pipeline win to change the narrative, and it needs it before the Dupixent cliff moves from a future concern to a present one. Watch the remaining immunology and rare disease readouts closely, because the story Sanofi tells for the rest of 2026 will hinge on whether something in the pipeline delivers. Catalyst, calendar date, event tickers, Friday, July 31, Section 232, Pharma Tariffs, effective, large companies. Multiple? This week Q2 earnings continue for big pharma multiple. Late July BMS, CAR-XT Alzheimer's, psychosis, readout, BMY late. July PT, sepiapterin PKU, readout, PTTT August, Tratun Kotitskiks, Replimune, RP1, FDR, response, Repl August, Xitram Capricorn, Deramiocel, PDUFA, AdCom pending, Capriminent Revolution, Medicines, CNPV filing, RVMD Minent Lilly, Found IoT2D filing under CNPV LY ongoing, Biotech Investment National Security Act awaits committee vote multiple 2026 Neladalkib, FDA decision, ALK NSCLC GSKQ3 2026 Revolution, Daraxon Racib approval projected, Truist RVMDQ3 2026 Unicure, Huntington's gene therapy under review, CoolRec3 2026 Regensbio, Duchenne gene therapy, BLA filing RGNXQ3 2026 ABVRA Apogee, Vertex to Crinetics, Ipsen, deals, close expected multiple Q3 2026 Merck, KGAI, BO, Techne, close expected MKKGY, KPT, OCT Celldex, Basel Volumab, Phase 3 chronic hives, Data CLDX Epi, 19 Ultragenics, UX111 PDUFA, San Filippo Type A, Rare Sept, 29, Section 232 Pharma Tariffs, effective, all others, multiple H2 2026 Merck, ESAC TMT Global Filings, expected MRK Norv 14 Summit, Evo Nesimab FDA decision, NSCLC, SMMT Norv, 30 Vertex, Povetacicept, PDUFA, IJA Nephropathy, VRTXD 2026, Mineralize Lorundrostat, PDUFAM Loyesdec, 7 Lilly, Investment Community Meeting, LY 2097, Retatrutide, launch anticipated, BMO-LI 2028 generic drug tariffs take effect. Multiple Retatrutide hit in 2 more pivotal trials and widened Lilly's lead in the biggest market in medicine. Tariffs land Friday, the week's thread to watch. And Sanofi keeps stumbling. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the Pro Hub Read. Full article sponsorship slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing. New Biomed Nexus signals weekly sales intelligence for life sciences BD teams. Learn more